So we're checking out what is the most hated Call of Duty, and I think a part of this is what's the most underrated, where it started. Maybe it got a lot of hate, so a lot of people didn't try it out, but we'll see, kind of see where T-Dog takes it.
If I were to ask you what you think the most underrated Call of Duty was, what would you say? Infinite Warfare?
Yes, Infinite Warfare. I don't think Ghost got nearly as much hate. I think there was a lot of issues with the cross-platform thing where it was next gen and last gen and created a lot of issues. I remember being on a PS3, and then we went to a PS4 at the time, something along those combination where they kind of had the multiple versions where you can upgrade for free or whatever the heck it was. But there was a lot of issues with that. But I still think IW was definitely the most underrated in my opinion. And we'll kind of see where he goes with
Ghost, Black Ops Cold War, Modern Warfare 2 2022. Okay,
no.
Let's not kid ourselves. I would say the most underrated Call of Duty game is one most people never even mention. One that built up so much hype just to be torn down by the trends of the time. A game plagued by poor leadership, a game plagued by bugs and glitches, and a game that despite all, innovated in ways that you'd never expect. That game is Call of Duty World War II.
And to add a couple of points that he was making there is that part of the problem was that we went from Advanced Warfare to BO3 to IW. People were kind of tired of the jetpack COD, and everyone was kind of clamoring for a boots on the ground Call of Duty. And then Call of Duty got the bright idea, you know what, let's go back to World War II instead of Modern Warfare or a Black Ops style title around the 2000s. No, we had to go back to World War II. And although there's a lot of history buffs and people are nostalgia about the time period or whatever, they like the history surrounding World War II, it's not always the most fun to play video games that take place in World War II, besides the campaign, right? So I think that was a huge problem with it. They eventually turn the ship around, which I'm sure he'll talk about, and we'll see kind of where it goes from there.
By the middle of Infinite Warfare's life cycle, fans were already clamoring for the next entry into the Call of Duty franchise. Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remastered, which was bundled into a more pricey version of Infinite Warfare, thanks Activision, led fans to beg the dev teams to bring back the classic boots on the ground movement. In addition to that request, fans wanted to return to the past or even the present, as the future setting was wearing thin year after year.
Yep,
then,
fair.
On April 26, 2017, a curious little trailer appeared on Call of Duty's YouTube channel. On paper, Call of Duty World War II was the answer to millions of fans' complaints. Boots on the ground gameplay, an OG Call of Duty setting of the 1940s rather than decades or centuries into the future, and a reason to get your boys back online. Yet, why was this game forgotten? Why does it never come up in conversation? Does the community hate it, or do we just forget what it had to offer? Did the complete overhaul of this game aid to its survival, or by the time it got good, was it already left in the dust? Now join me.
I think more of that happened,
for
sure.
What might just be the most underrated Call of Duty in the franchise history.
There's a bomb on the ammo supply. State of the COD in 2017. All right, let's take us down.
Advanced Warfare and Black Ops 3 had been well received by the Call of Duty community, alongside their new movement system centered around flying with an exosuit. But by the end of Treyarch's run in 2016, fans were ready for Infinity Ward to try something new, fresh, and nostalgic. So, what did Infinity Ward do? They
that was actually crazy.
A game that nearly killed the Call of Duty franchise. While diehards stayed with the game, mostly thanks to the Modern Warfare Remastered, casuals left in favor for more of a classic FPS game.
I don't even know if that's the case. I think a lot of people just stayed back on Black Ops 3. And I think they just took a year off, right? Like, I don't know. I know there's a core audience that did care about the Modern Warfare Remastered, but it wasn't as much. I don't know. We'll never know.
Battlefield 1. Devastated at sales
Luckily,
numbers,
Battlefield 1 was bad.
Somehow managing to come out ahead of EA, Activision went back to the drawing board. They had to make a plan to get players to return. They were going to take Call of Duty back to its roots. The next year, Activision swung back. They announced what they believed to be the savior of the Call of Duty franchise, Call of Duty World War II. There was actually rumors around Sledgehammer's game being Advanced Warfare 2, but Activision actually vetoed it and told them to go back to the basics. Ironically, the trailer was reminiscent of a very similar trailer from the year prior. That must have just been a coincidence. Fans were thrilled to see the direction Sledgehammer Games was taking, which resulted in this trailer reaching the top of the trending page and racking up a total of 1 million likes in just a few days. If you compare this to the Infinite Warfare trailer, yeah, this is much better. The hype was real for Sledgehammer's second ever Call of
These guys ended up going and running 2K. In my opinion, they stood in the way of a lot of changes the company like the player base wanted. Especially around that time, it'd be like, okay, the players want this, and then they'd go, no. And then as soon as they were gone, boom, 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 Sledgehammer was cooking.
Call of Duty entry, and old fans were finally returning. Praise was thrown at both Activision and
CDL?
Sledgehammer for finally listening to the community. Not much was announced after the initial launch trailer. There was a story trailer, multiplayer trailer, and a few behind-the-scenes live streams exploring the game's offerings. Also announced was a Destiny 2-esque online player hub where players could show off their prestige levels and characters in between matches.
That was all about supply drops, though.
People were hyped because this was something that Destiny did really well. Now, a little side note, right around this time, a little game you may never have heard of began to rise in popularity, Fortnite. It won't come into play till later, but it's important to note that this timing as it creates a total shift in how World War II was received at launch. November 3rd, 2017 inched closer and closer, and fans' anticipation was reaching higher and higher. The beta was received with decent enough reception despite
my first year making
issues,
content
pre-orders
full
were
time.
higher than they had been in years. Playing the open beta was even incentivized via a free helmet to customize each player's character. Then, the day arrived. The game didn't work. Server issues persisted throughout launch week, rendering the game borderline unplayable. Not even the solid campaign could make up for the failed matchmaking services upon launch. Because let's be honest, most Call of Duty players are playing multiplayer first.
100%.
These issues took about a week to get resolved, but when they...
That's why I'm a little disappointed that MW3's campaign was so awful, because that ruined the opportunity for us to play the campaign early. I would have loved to play BO6's campaign early, but we probably have to cycle back around to that probably in like the end of November or maybe around the integration of Warzone, when we're slowing down on multiplayer zombies content for the base game before we transition over to all the changes that are coming within Warzone. But unfortunate that got taken away from us. So not a day one gameplay that we're playing.
Players then began to realize just how rough and bland the game really was. The promised customization lacked any depth. Players were able to customize their soldier, but not more than outfits and helmets. And how did you earn these? Supply drops. Yes. The infamous microtransaction cash grab came back. And they even gave you a platform to show off what you got in the supply drops by...
To be fair, it wasn't gone. They were brought in Advanced Warfare. Black Ops 3 figured out how to optimize them. IW, they were even better in a sense where they were able to optimize them. And then this final version, they were probably the most fair. Because around this time, there was starting to be legislation in a lot of different countries where they were making microtransactions in the form of supply drops or loot boxes basically banned from the game. So they couldn't even have them in the game. And I think there's some regions where you weren't even allowed to do this. I'm not 100% sure at this point. And then once we cycled into the next game, there was still a version of them and they were getting dialed down.
Opening them up in the HQ. You could also get gun variants from supply drops, but there just weren't many attachments to even unlock per gun.
Some of those were like pay to win though, because the iron sights could be different.
Create a class system in replacement for a division system. Players
terrible
picked their
system
division in order to begin a class setup. They could pick infantry if they wanted to feel like a traditional frontline soldier with a semi-automatic rifle and a self-loading pistol. Expeditionary for players wanting to be an aggressive scout with shotguns and the dreaded and poorly balanced incendiary shells. Airborne for those wanting a submachine gun to run and gun. Armored for heavies who want to use armor, LMGs, and bazookas. And mountain for those who want to be a long-range fighter and snipe to assist their team. These divisions locked you into one kind of weapon and forced players to stick to specific playstyle. Want a trick shot and run and gun with a sniper? No. Too bad. You hang out behind everyone on the front lines. Want to suppress any gun that isn't an SMG? Oops, only SMGs can use them. This system attempted to be innovative, yet proved counterintuitive
Very
both
limiting.
to COD fans and new players. And get this, as a part of the division system, limited sprint became the norm, and you were forced to choose between either carrying a tactical grenade or a lethal grenade. You could not have both normally. Limited sprint made the game feel
I do like the idea of a pick 10 system because it does solve the lethal and tactical problem. When you make it so that we have like a fixed loadout system like we've had in a lot of the recent Call of Duties, every match, every loadout will have a lethal and a tactical without it necessarily being a choice on the player. Obviously, you can throw those at the start of the match, but then that leads to nade spam, versus if you make it a pick 10 or a pick 10 variant, more often than not, people will rather load up on extra perks or extra attachments on their weapon, or even a secondary weapon with more attachments, rather than having a lethal and a tactical. And then this modifies some of the meta things, so maybe you don't need flak jacket quite as often if people aren't throwing nades, and then it kind of leads to a more variety of choice. Even though most people will probably lean the other way, it does open up some slots so you can have some creative freedoms with your loadout and not feel like I have to run flak jacket because everyone gets a nade. But obviously there's always a domino, rock, paper, scissors, cat and mouse type of balance that goes back and forth.
Especially coming off the tail end of the exosuit era, in which the new movement made the game feel quicker. And the forced selection between lethal and tactical grenades made them feel practically useless and only handy in oddly specific scenarios, rather than having the flexibility of carrying both for any situation players would encounter.
This is where we kind of agree on philosophy there.
Flawless multiplayer system, and honestly, all playstyles just felt the same. The game also shipped with a minimal amount of maps on day one. At launch, players could only battle on 9 maps, and one of these was Gustav Cannon.
I will say a lot of the maps in that game, though, they worked not because necessarily the maps were good, but because the spawn system in that game was good. Although you could spawn trap, I thought it was good overall.
The idea of bringing the
boys fair.
Back together was already
you knew what you were getting out of it
before the fans' eyes.
The downfall.
Remember when I mentioned a little game called Fortnite? Well, that was one of the handful of factors in World War II's decline in popularity. Fortnite's popularity rose quickly towards the end of summer 2017 and continued to keep growing into the fall of 2017. What made it so popular was its price tag of $0, which encouraged gamers everywhere to check it out. This was unheard of at the time. When it came to Call of Duty World War II's $60 price tag, a lot of players found themselves debating whether or not—
I never talked about this much, but back in the day, one of my cousin, his friend, and we used to play all the time. We'd play different games. We actually played Fortnite quite a bit together. I got like I played through the first season or whatever, got the John Wick skin. We had 100 wins, and we played quite a bit. And he was like, yeah, you should start your channel around then. I was like, no, I'm gonna do Call of Duty. That's what I know. So in another universe, I could have been doing Fortnite content, and you guys wouldn't be watching, I guess, right?
Or not, it was worth it. This further drove the dilemma and made it easier
but we'd
for
have a
players
different
just
audience
to move to
for sure.
Fortnite. In Fortnite, you get a group of guys together and it's $0. On top of all this, Fortnite introduced cross-platform. So if your buddy was on PlayStation or Xbox or PC, you could all play together. Outside of just casual gamers, content creators even found themselves
shifted the whole landscape.
Fortnite content. The biggest example of this creator shift would be Ali A.
Yep.
For the longest time, Ali A was the biggest name in COD content creation. He had played every Call of Duty, whether it was in its prime of the game or during Infinite Warfare. Ali A stayed on top and was the king of this gaming subculture on YouTube. Ali A started off playing COD World War II just like he did every year with the new installment. But then he one day decided to upload Fortnite while Call of Duty's popularity online began to tank, and the rest is history.
It. 10 million, 20 million.
Became solely about Fortnite, and the once king of COD had given up his crown. Luckily, we saw the rise of new creators like Dismo, who rose out of the empty void of content creators who left COD for Fortnite. The sad truth remains that at this time, Call of Duty World War II was just stale. Even the 3 new modes couldn't keep fans entertained. The modes Gridiron and War were added alongside with the 1v1
Gridiron was so goated in that game.
Couldn't hold people's attention.
Eliminated some of the streak spam from requisitions.
How the 1v1 pit worked was that players signed up to 1v1 and vote on what weapons to use. The winner stays, and the leaderboard shows off who has the highest win streak in the HQ. Gridiron was a boots on the ground take on Black Ops 3's uplink. Players are tasked tasked with carrying a ball across the map to their enemy's goal in order to score points. When someone has the ball, they can't use a gun, and it's up to their teammates to help them. War Mode was a linear objective-based game mode that saw players passing through 3 stages of a specifically designed
gonna do the bomb
map
on
to
the ammo
reach the
supply?
end goal. 1 second you could be storming the beaches
Nah,
of
he didn't do
Normandy,
it.
and the next you and your team are guiding a tank to blow up artillery guns. This mode added a much new and needed fresh approach
This is where
to
you were able to do
gameplay
your
that
sniper kills.
resembled that of one of COD's competitor
Easy.
FPS games, Overwatch. Despite how well these 3 modes were made, it couldn't hold players' already dwindling interest in the game. Bored and disappointed, COD fans either continued to force feed themselves more and more World War II gameplay or moved on entirely to Fortnite. Then, the first DLC pack was announced, The Resistance. DLC releases in past Call of Duty games had felt more like low-stake fun additions to the game to keep it from getting repetitive. But DLC Pack 1 felt like it was going to be a make or break for Call of Duty World War II. The game needed more content, and it needed it stat. Anticipation rose until the DLC's launch on PS4 on January 30th, 2018. The Resistance DLC introduced 3 new multiplayer maps, 1 war mode map, and 1 zombies map. This DLC was turning out to be the same as the past ones. A few maps made to spice up the rotation of the base game. The 3 multiplayer maps were Occupation,
Hey, the
Valkyrie,
paratroopers
and
were
Anthropoid.
insane at launch.
Anthropoid
That had
took
nerfed them
place
so
in
hard.
Prague and focused around a center lane design with good spots for sniping. It was fine. Valkyrie took place in the woods of East Prussia and was a solid map. It had a great World War II
I think they even
aesthetic
switched it to
and a
comp,
good
right? The
layout.
Resistance map,
Arguably
this
one
one?
of the better DLC maps that entire year. The biggest one that excited fans, however, was Occupation, which was a remake of Resistance from Modern Warfare 3. Do I have to say Modern Warfare 3 2011 now, or are we calling MW3 2023? Who cares? The new war map was nothing to shake a stick at, and barely anyone cared for zombies, as it was trying too hard to be like Treyarch's beloved mode. So the rest of the pack was a snooze fest to most fans. The biggest thing, however, was the new division called Resistance. Players were finally excited to see if this would give some purpose to the division system, and it didn't. The Resistance division only introduced a tactical knife skill and a new pistol. Players couldn't even use the tactical knife on pistols within other divisions. What was the point? Things were looking rough and player counts were continuing to fall. So Activision decided to step in to attempt to...
Also, side note on this is, since this is my first year of content, I knew no different. I was continuing to post videos. I didn't know it was a down year relative because I didn't make content previously. I made a few videos at the end of IW, but that was more like me feeling like getting my feet wet with content creation. And I didn't realize how bad World War II was in terms of popularity until we got to BO4. And it had a huge spike up compared to World War II. And I had learned a lot. So it was an interesting year.
Create one of the biggest comeback stories in franchise history.
April?
On February 20th, 2018, the COD community was met with a wild announcement. Activision announced that Glenn Schofield and Michael Condrey, the founders
April's
of
when they did the
Sledgehammer
update.
Games, had decided to transition from their duties at Sledgehammer to executive roles at Activision. This felt out of left field. Many believed the pair was fired after the dumpster fire that was World War II's launch and the poor fan reception, but no true answer was ever given. Aaron Halen was placed in their positions and is still the studio head to this day.
He's chill.
What did this mean for fans? The Call of Duty community was terrified amid the chaos of these departures. Was World War II going to get 3 more DLCs anymore? Was it going to get overhauled and fixed to the fans' liking? Was there ever going to be an Advanced Warfare 2? Well, fans wouldn't get this answer until April 10th when DLC 2 War Machine launched
That
for
was
PS4.
game
This
over.
is
It
the
came.
overhauled
They
and
came
saved
back.
Call of Duty World War
Came
II.
back
The
so
DLC
hard.
came with more maps, the coolest one being based in Egypt, but it also introduced massive gameplay changes. Divisions were completely changed.
The V2?
It was finally similar to the original Creator class system.
Oh, no, the map is
Bayonets,
V2.
Suppressors, incendiary shells, and the tactical knife were officially added as attachments for any weapon. They were no longer locked behind one division. The disastrous division system was finally gone. They also eliminated the basic training titled Primed, which allowed players to have an extra attachment slot. Now, every loadout gave guns an extra attachment slot. But that
Genius.
wasn't all. Now players could have both a tactical grenade and a lethal grenade. No longer were you forced to have one over the other. Launchers could also be secondaries on any division. And to top it all off, Sledgehammer had one more surprise for COD fans. Limited sprint was no more. Unlimited sprint was back and a standard across all divisions. This was one of the biggest complaints of...
What's funny is there's a lot of people that are like newer to Call of Duty. They didn't come back to the franchise or come to the franchise until 2019. And there's a lot of times where people have said, well, they shouldn't listen to the creators, and they're really on the opposite side of creators, right? Where creators often give feedback. People on Reddit were giving feedback. People are in tune with the community, give feedback. It's not just creators. And a lot of the stuff that was suggested by creators and the people that are hardcore Call of Duty fans were implemented in this update that overhauled the game. Not everything aligned with everything identically, because obviously I would prefer a pick 10. We didn't get that, but this system was still better than the one we had. Despite it giving us a lethal and a tactical, it solved a lot of the other issues. Well, this is kind of one of those cycles where we already kind of know how it's going to go back and forth. They try something, somebody within the studio, often it feels like it's one or two individuals who are in charge, make the decision that these things won't change. And then with something like this, they ended up changing them, and it improved the game drastically. The same thing happened with 2019. There was going to be no minimap. People made the decision for that. Didn't take long, that got changed. Many other changes happened, and the same thing happened recently with Warzone 2. A lot of the feedback was given, and we're like, that's not what we wanted, that's not what we asked for, and inevitably we're going back to what we originally had because that's what we originally wanted. Despite it being maybe played out for some, it's what you want, and eventually with minor changes, it'll still feel new and fresh. And this kind of a cycle that we've done multiple times. Like MW 2019 and Warzone 2 weren't our first rodeo if you've been following and playing COD for a while.
The fans pre-DLC 2 and the devs actually listened. Prayers had been answered and things were finally looking positive for fans of Call of Duty World War II. It was also around this time that Sledgehammer Games took a less grounded approach to the game than before and allowed for more goofy and unrealistic maps to exist. The best example of this was from the summer event in which the map Sandbox was announced. This had players shrunken down to
we haven't really had good summer events in a while.
Sandbox. On top
IW
of this,
had a good one, and so did this map.
Shining the sun's energy down into the map via a magnifying glass to burn people who crossed its path. The outfits also started to get crazier. They also introduced super fun game modes such as Horde Point. This mode is essentially Hardpoint, but with zombie NPCs roaming around the map. So on top of players going for you, the zombies were attacking you as well. Infected and Prop Hunt were also introduced to the party game's playlist.
Prop Hunt was good in this game.
Weapons also got goofier. I mean, they even added a sword to the game. All of this plus 2 more solid DLC packs helped to keep players satisfied until the launch of Black Ops 4. Call of Duty World War II was finally living up to its potential. The devs were listening to the fans, and the new-headed Sledgehammer Games seemed to be helping the company's reputation.
2 was working his magic.
Player numbers didn't rise, as by the time these changes took effect, people had already moved on.
This is another good point. What happens with things like this is people go, well, when for Warzone, for example, when they brought back and they listened and they're like, well, the players didn't come back. Well, a lot of people haven't had an opportunity. They don't even know the game has changed. And that's why something as big as the integration that's going to happen this time around will be good, but it won't be important until we get Verdansk back, which will be like the, okay, I have to go try it out. And they'll see all the changes that have been made to essentially be a better version than we originally had, minus some here or there tweaks that still probably need to happen. It's still playable, serviceable, and what people will be happy playing. At least that's what I hope. But we'll see.
Call of Duty World War II was promised to be the Call of Duty game to bring us back to the franchise's roots. While it delivered on these promises, it took half of its life cycle to get it right. It's understandable why fans left weeks after launch, and even more understandable that they didn't return after the game's overhaul. Everything was against this game. Poor leadership, the rise of Fortnite, the bland color and setting of World War II. But the craziest part of it all, Call of Duty World War II was the best-selling game on the PS4 store in 2017, and its first
Call of Duty just don't lose, bro.
Top-selling DLC lists in PS4 as well. It just goes to show you how popular Call of Duty is, even when it feels like it's failing. Hopefully, though, after having this year of chaos contextualized, you too will see how the least remembered Call of Duty title may have just been the most underappreciated.
W. Go ahead and check out T-Dog. Appreciate the support in today's video. Thank you for watching as always. Have a great day.